Hi, my name is Shari Doherty, and I'm a lady in red, in Act 2 of my career and living my best life. My perspective on life and behaviors have been governed by who I was as a child, who I became, and who I am still striving to be. People my age are beautiful, bold, confident, and full of wisdom, and truly, the encore of the story of your life is still when the best songs are yet to be sung. My mission in this podcast is to shine the spotlight on people like me, have real conversations about reinvention stories, and inspire you to continue to follow your dreams regardless of your age. I'm doing it for Daisy. Who are you doing it for? Good day and welcome to today's episode of the Encore podcast. I am delighted to have today with me Kerry Ramsay, who is very well known in the Kingston community. She's also building something amazing where she lives now in Stratford, Ontario. She is 53 years old and she is a speaker, an author, and a women's entrepreneurship coach. There is no sign of her slowing down. I just see her snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And she's bringing lots of amazing women along with her. I was honored to be part of one of her collaboratives this year, and I also learned a lot about speaking. And so I'm very delighted to introduce you all today to Kerry Ramsay.
Thanks so much for having me, Shari. And the snowball analogy, I think, is very apt as we're now in the winter months. And
Right?
I think all of us are just moving forward and gathering speed as we go.
Absolutely. I just want to be goodness and bring all the goodness with me, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Kerry, as we do with all our guests, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? So, what's your backstory, who you are, where you were born and raised, what your childhood was like, any highlights or lowlights that you're comfortable to share? What did Kerry's start look like?
Well, I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, believe it or not. I don't know if you knew I was from the prairies, but in a very much a wintering culture. I mean, here in Southern Ontario, we think we know winter. We don't know winter, right? And my parents actually, after I think I was about 3 years old, we moved 5 hours north of Winnipeg to Thompson, Manitoba. So the formative years of my life, first 7 years, were a lot of winter. That's what I remember. And then we moved to Ottawa, which of course is the world's seventh coldest capital. And so it's funny when you talk about childhood, I remember a lot of winters, and that is not a bad thing. Wintering actually now is a trending, I guess topic that people talk about what wintering does for us. And as Canadians, I think we actually take for granted the seasons, but not just the seasons, but the forcing of us indoors for a season of time, and in many areas for 6 months of the year. And while I love those outdoor sports, so as a kid, I grew up skiing once we got to Ontario, not so much in the prairies, but skiing and skating and snowshoeing, and those were all wonderful. But a big part of my childhood, I also remember being indoors where it was cozy, and inevitably I had a book in my hands. It's a time where, as an only child, and I should say that was a big part of
Okay.
growing up as well, I kind of had a solitary existence. But the cool thing is, I loved my own company. And I don't know why, but I just grew to accept myself at a very young age. And man, have I ever realized that that is a superpower later in life? If you just be okay with who you are and spending time with yourself. And as an only child, we have to do that a lot of the
Right?
time. Again, that plus the wintering, which I come back to again. So I grew up with, again, a book in my hands. My parents never owned a TV. We didn't have a TV probably till I was 21. And
Brilliant.
so that just is another layer of why I turned to reading. And of course, if you're a reader, you inevitably are going to turn to writing at some point in your life. So yeah, whatever city we lived in and whatever cold climate, the library was one of our favorite places to go as a family. And so that library card for me as a kid, that was a passport to freedom, because I think I remember that we could check out 7 books per library card. Well, there's 3 people in my family, myself and my parents. And so that meant 21 books. And
Wow.
so my parents would get 1 book, I would get like 19 books, take them home and return them by the next week and be ready for more. Like, I was a voracious reader as a kid. So that's a big part of growing up in those colder areas and colder climates. But boy, am I ever appreciative of it now. And I think as a kid, I don't remember hating the cold or hating winter. It was just something that was a part of who I was. Yeah, so those are a few layers, I think, of who I was. And because we didn't have that television, My parents raised me to be a creator and not a consumer. And that again was just a game changer, right? For my whole life trajectory, I think, where even today I wake up and I'm ready to create. It's just how I'm programmed and how I'm wired. So those are a few, I would say they were highlights. I don't know if people would consider growing up in one of the world's seven coldest capitals a low light, but for me it wasn't.
Awesome. Well, kudos to your parents because I have the utmost respect and now understand why you're so intelligent. I am not a fan of television. And so I wish I grew up in a household that didn't have TV, but we had too much TV. I had one question in there when you were talking, though, is how did you navigate then not being able as a child or even a young teenager to be able to talk about pop culture with your friends?
That was always a sticking point. I remember there were television shows that people would talk about at lunchtime, and I had no idea what they were
Right.
talking about. I did feel on the outside of that for sure, because what kids get together and talk about the books they've read over the weekend? None of them. Maybe the Goosebumps series or Sweet Valley High, but no one was reading the books I was reading. So yeah, that was definitely something that was an issue. And I will say, as a kid, like it wasn't like, oh, I'm so happy I have no TV. Oh no, I wanted my parents to buy a TV so I could relate a little bit better in those cases. So yeah, that was definitely something that came up. And now that I have a TV, I'm like, oh, I'm not really missing anything.
Oh no, and it's worse now because the demise of TV was
Oh
reality
yeah.
TV, but I digress. The point of that is, again, kudos to your parents because they raised a really intelligent lady. And I
Mm.
personally believe that comes from reading at a young age. So good for you. So
Thanks. And I just wanted to add one thing, which is interesting now that as a business owner, one of the programs that I run even is Read to Lead. Like, I believe that business owners, because, and I know we're skipping over some history there, but as business owners, we need to read because we need to continually, not only find out what are the newest trends, and I realize we can read digitally on the internet, but there's something different with sitting down with a memoir of another business owner and reading their experience. We develop empathy, right? The more that we read others' stories. And I find today we don't really spend a lot of time getting into other people's stories. So for that point as well, I think as adults, I think we do need to read to lead because it does help us to develop that empathy for other people.
yeah, I agree 100%. I have a daily activities list, which is basically my recipe for success in a day. And on there is read. And I don't get my point, we'll call it, for the day unless I read at least 10 pages.
Beautiful. I love
I'm
it.
trying to always have on the go personal and business development books because I'm very interested in growing my business and growing myself. But then I also always have a novel just for brain candy
Yeah.
going on. I have multiple reads as well at any given time.
Love it.
So, what did your middle look like? Kind of, off to university, I would assume. And I believe you got married, had children, did all those good things. So, what did the middle years look like for you?
Yeah, so growing up in Ottawa, I ended up staying home for school. So I went to University of Ottawa and studied communications and then did my master's at the Carleton School of Journalism, which was also in Ottawa. And as I said, I loved reading and I loved writing. And I'm one of those people that actually ended up doing for her career what she studied at university, which is really odd. And I realized that. But I had a clear understanding, I think, like I say, as a kid, I want to write. And like I remember my dad telling me, like, Carrie, I don't know if, you can get paid to write. I'm not sure if that's actually a thing. But now, of course, then you realize that within organizations of all types, my first writing job was for the RCMP and, brands everywhere need writers. And so at that time, it was a pretty lucrative job. And so obviously I'm still writing to this day. So the cool other, payoff of going to university was I did meet my husband. So I married my university sweetheart. We're still married almost 30 years later. That was sort of the middle part, I suppose, if you want to think those building years. We got married, we had two children, and it was about that time, I would say, there was a bit of a turning point for me, if you will, in that, we were settled in Ottawa. We had bought a condo and we were living there, very happy. But my dream job was to be a national magazine editor. I was not only a book reader, but a magazine. I just loved magazines. And even today, I love them. And so that was my dream job. I was freelancing for various magazines. And one of the magazines I was working for was a national magazine. And they invited me to be their editor in chief. And so that was just an absolute dream. So we sold our house in Ottawa. We moved closer to Toronto. And Sherry, what I thought was going to be the job of my dreams turned out to be the job of my nightmares. And it
Oh,
was just an awful, toxic work environment. The publisher was what I call an unmentor, who kind of undid a lot of confidence that I arrived with. And that's obviously the opposite of what a mentor should do. So, long story short, after 3 months, I resigned my dream job and was a bit bereft. I was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I had been so excited. The pay was wonderful. I was making pretty much on par with what my father had made in the government after 3 decades. I thought I had arrived. I was 25 years old. I thought I had arrived. And then this just really, sent me plummeting in terms of self-esteem and what I thought I was capable of. But the cool thing was, and as every story does have that silver lining, it forced me to start my first business. And so it was a freelance writing business. And I really started it because I had to. Like, we had purchased another condo closer, to where the job was, and I was able to pay the mortgage for a whole year based on just selling my writing. And so my husband also was working very hard beside me as well, but I was able to contribute in a meaningful way. And I thought, wow, I'm doing this, building something from scratch. Like, I'm not working for anyone. This is so cool. So ever since that time, I have been a serial entrepreneur. I have owned multiple businesses, both online and bricks and mortar. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to stop because I just love this challenge of creating something from scratch and also seeing not only the payoff for myself. It's not about that. It's about seeing others lifted in a meaningful way. And that's where I get a lot of joy even today from the business and the work that I do. So that was sort of one of those middle pivotal experiences for me, I think. I certainly haven't had a traumatic lifestyle, but when I look back, that was a defining moment and one that, obviously was dark at the time, but turned into something that was extremely needed in my life. And it was a shift that I don't know if I would have done otherwise.
right. Well, it sounds like it absolutely put you on the right path to where you were meant to get to. When you were talking, I was thinking, I forget that you're in business because you're someone who is giving and giving and giving. And the way that you're doing it is in an educational way. And I know, like, some of the workshops you have to pay to get into, and some of the things there's, coaching and all that sort of stuff. But it's so natural and comfortable from you that I've never felt like I've been pitched to. I just forgot that sometimes you get paid for what you do. I just thought you did it. So again, that is like a great character of yourself and how genuine you are, which is fantastic. Now, if I may, I know you did make a big family move from Kingston to Stratford, and that was a few years later. Can you talk about why you made that move?
Yeah, so we ended up leaving the Kingston Belleville area where we had been for 18 years. So we had established not only me doing my businesses on this side, but we also had established careers. I was a full-time professor for 15 years. My husband's a school principal. So we were well established there, but we had always wanted and planned to retire in Stratford. Well, when COVID happened and a lot of my work went online, I was able to, basically do the kind of work that I do from anywhere. So right now, I actually run the women's entrepreneurship strategy for Queen's University. That's my current role and biggest contract. And so I am able to do that work from anywhere. We have, a couple times a year where we go in, we do big events. But by and large, the women that I serve are more interested in hopping on a Zoom call than driving to downtown Kingston, finding parking, a half day activity just for an hour coaching. So when COVID happened and we realized that my work was online and my husband could change school boards, the day after our son's prom, we actually moved to Stratford because we wanted both kids to be launched, if you will. And so now both kids live in Toronto and we're here in Stratford. I should mention that not only do we love this area, but we're also closer to our parents who are, in need of support from time to time. And that also makes a lot of sense for the phase of life that we're in. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. I still have, a foot very firmly planted in the Kingston area. I love the over 1,600 women that we serve through the We Can Project and Queens. And then also, of course, I absolutely love where I live, and whether it's summer or winter, there's so much to do.
Right, absolutely. So I'm going to spoiler, but you're 53 now. You just wrote a book and you have a really thriving and growing coaching business. Tell us all about that. I'm excited for you to be able to share.
Sure. So I run right now in Stratford, Ontario. I run the Fresh Idea Collective. So that's the name of my business in this area where I provide monthly meetups, mentorship, and masterminds to women identifying entrepreneurs. So that work is really meaningful to me. Most of it is also in person, right? So remember, I spend a lot of time doing remote work. I really also, for my well-being, need that in-person element. And so this area has just got so many women entrepreneurs as well. I think right across Canada, the numbers are staggering how quickly women entrepreneurship as a field is growing or as, just representation in business. It's really encouraging. So when we moved here and I realized every second person I was meeting seemed to be a woman entrepreneur, I was like, I think I'm going to, start something here. I hadn't really planned on it. I held my first event September 2023, which was a year after we had moved here. And it sold out quickly. And so at that event, people were saying, hey, can we buy like multiple tickets? Can we buy like, and I was like, oh my gosh, does that mean we're going to have multiple events? And
Right?
so there was a demand. And so I was excited to be the one to help fill that. And so even now at this point, we've had over 30 events for nearly 400 women, and we've poured almost $40,000 back into the local woman-owned business economy, which is very exciting for me and is really the heart and soul of what I do. So yeah, so we operate, and I say we because I collaborate with so many women in our area. That experience, as well as, of course, almost a dozen years now of working with women entrepreneurs and certainly being one myself for 25 years, has led to the writing of a book which came out last year, now in 2025, and it's called Helium. It's available now through freshideacollective.com. I believe you can also find it on Amazon and in Indigos. But the book is about leveraging the power of community to lift yourself and others. And it's so interesting. I wasn't really planning to write a book. The book kind of found me. The title is what came to me first. It was December 2024, and I was just sort of reflecting on the year. This word helium kept just sort of floating above my head, if you will. And I was like, what is it that lifts people and businesses and women? I said, you know what? It's community. It's community that's the helium that lifts us. And again, full circle, if you go back to my childhood, I grew up as an only child. I loved my own company, but we're not meant to live in isolation. We're not wired that way. We're not designed that way. We need each other. And I think it was sort of that full circle moment of realizing that the through line through every business I've ever had, through every successful venture I've ever had, has been community, where I've reached out to others and asked for help, and where I've turned around and said, how can I serve you? How can we, collaborate, work together? So that is the book that I put out into the universe, and it's being really well received. I'm very excited with the message because honestly, if it's the only book I ever write, it's the message I want to put out in the world, which is that we need to be the lift we want to see in the world.
Love that. I love everything about it. It was beautifully and eloquently said. I have it. I haven't gotten through it yet because I have a stack of books beside my bed, but it's in the stack, I promise you. And so I will be reading it.
It's good winter reading.
Yes, absolutely. And what's ahead for you?
Well, now that the book is here, I'm now focusing in 2026 on doing more speaking. The book is just a great container. I guess it's one form of the package, but I find to really speak about the themes that are in the book. I'm doing a lot more of that, both online and in person this year. So, not looking like 5 years ahead, just like what is in store for this year. I'm looking to continue to serve the incredible women entrepreneurs that I serve through Queens in the Kingston area, growing my own business here in the Stratford area, and doing, like I say, a lot of teaching and training, educating about this idea that we need each other. But it's not as simple as that. It's also like if you have a business, how can you grow a community around that business, right? So in the book, especially, it's divided into three parts. So the third part of the book really does get into the strategies and techniques of how do you create your own uplifting community. And so that's what I want to see in the world, is that more women are doing more of that, because again, in the book there's a section on female rivalry, and if we look back to the 80s and 90s, where there was only one seat at the table for a woman, and this whole idea of tearing other women down so we can get ahead, I mean, that is so passe, that is so, patriarchal, if let's be honest. Like there's only one group of people it serves when women turn down other women, and it's not women who benefit. So that's sort of again the underlying theme of the book is how as a group of women we can, move women's issues forward, be heard, be seen, and supporting other women along the way. And by the way, not just, when I say lifting others, not at our own detriment, right? Not at the cost of our own health and well-being, but we ourselves can be lifted as well. So surrounding ourselves with the right lift crew, that will help us to do that. I love the name of your podcast, Encore, right? Which to me, it evokes this idea of applause. And I think that for a lot of us, we're just looking for applause in the wrong places, right? It's like the question when we get into our 50s, and I think this is key for me, is whose applause matters, right? Who do I really care who is cheering me on and who's not?
Right.
And someone once shared with me sort of this visual of this idea that, you're standing in the middle of a stadium, you're on the field. Is it really the spectators that matter, or is it people who are on the field with you? The people who are there helping you, right? Who are on your team, in other words. And I've realized that it's those people. Those people are my lift crew, not the masses in the stands, because I'm never going to please all of them. And if I try to get their applause every day, I'll just exhaust myself and I won't even recognize myself. So that's sort of the truth of what I've come to now in my 50s is that the applause that matters is actually a very small group of people. And those folks, as long as I have them cheering me on and saying encore, encore, that's all that matters to me. The rest is icing on the cake.
I agree. Right. The other thing that I'm a little tickled about still is my own applause.
Yes.
I know this sounds really silly, but I literally say, "Good job, Shari." When I have a good thought or when I know I've really knocked something out of the park, all that really matters is that I'm happy with me. And so
Yeah.
I do literally pat myself on the back. I sometimes say like, "Thanks, brain," because I'll have a
Yeah.
good idea. I'm like, "I have a good brain. I'm grateful for my
Mhm.
good brain. Thank you." And like, "Go, Shari." And it seems really funny, but it's really good for like being a positive lift for yourself. I 100% agree with you about the community and the company you keep.
Mhm.
You want to be with people that together you all rise up, right? And nobody has to
Absolutely.
stay down. There's enough helium, like you said, for everybody. While you were talking, I thought it was funny actually that before you even said that you spend a lot of time in winters, that I had used the snowball analogy. Because you feel like a snowball to me. And so maybe that was, a gift from the universe and the word that was given to me to represent you. But I feel
Mm.
like, you are definitely a snowball and you're just on this great momentum. You're collecting up other snowflakes with you and just
Oh, I love that.
something beautiful.
That makes me remember, and this is funny because I hadn't thought of this for so long, but my very first on-stage moment was as Susie Snowflake in Thompson, Manitoba in the Christmas production. And it was terrifying because I'm an introvert by nature. And it's funny that you say that because that was my first ever, and my mom made me this cute little costume. So Susie Snowflake, that was my first ever stage appearance.
Oh,
And
that's
here we are years later,
right.
snowballing, right? It's hilarious.
Okay, so if 53-year-old Kerry could talk to Susie Snowflake, what would she tell her?
I would tell her, you know what? Again, it goes back to be the lift you want to see in the world. And I know I'm paraphrasing Gandhi, who said, of course, be the change. I think for me, it's be the lift. Like a lot of times we sit around and say, oh, if only where there was this, for me, it was only if there was this group I could join. If only there was this book I could read. We spend a lot of time waiting for other people to be the lift we need. And I really believe that we can be that lift. Again, like you just said, for ourselves and in the process bring others along. Like there is nothing more uplifting. Last night I had our holiday event, for the women entrepreneurs in our community. I left there feeling so lifted, whereas I was the one that was, planning it, but it was just the reactions and watching the joy on people's faces, hearing conversations, and that to me was lifting. And I realize it's a community that I've created, but not only are they being lifted, but so am I. So I would say to myself, just continually look for ways that you can be the lift. Not, again, very importantly, not so that you are exhausted or depleted, but, such a way that you also feel lifted. Because when you do, you're in the right company, right? The right people alongside you lift you like helium. The wrong people will deflate you like a pin in a balloon, right? And once you figure out who those folks are, you're like, okay, those are the deflators. I'm going to avoid them. I'm looking for inflators. I'm looking for people who lift me as much as I'm able to lift them. So I think that that has made all the difference in my life. So I would just tell her that.
That's beautiful. There are no truer words. That is fantastic. If people wanted to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
So they can find me at freshideacollective.com. On Instagram, I'm at Fresh Idea Collective, and Facebook. So that's my personal business. And of course, if you're in the Kingston region, you can check out the We Can project with Queen's University, where I'm very active and we are going strong.
That's beautiful. Well, I feel very lifted just by spending a half an hour chatting with you today. Every time I talk to you, I feel encouraged and lifted and inspired. And I know that people are going to be able to hear this right through the podcast. I encourage people to check out Kerry and everything that she does. She's building great community everywhere she goes. And you're just that kind of energy that people want to be and should be around.
Likewise, right back at you. This podcast is doing just that for women over 50. So that's why I'm glad that you're a part of my community, because you are an inflator. There's no doubt about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been purely a joy. And to all of our listeners, please subscribe or share this podcast with anyone you think it could help or lift.